Well, unfortunately, with any diet trend, you get marketing involved and you get people doing things maybe for initially for their best interests, but usually it doesn't always work out that way. You know the old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Right.
So I think a lot of companies have produced gluten-free junk foods. They've produced, you know, kind of your cake, your donut, your breads, things that these individuals shouldn't be eating anyway. And they're trying to create substitutes that are accessible and that make life a little bit easier for those following a gluten-free diet. But really the core of the problem is most of these products are either loaded with sugar, they're loaded with genetically modified ingredients that also cause the same kinds of problems that gluten can cause, or they just really aren't gluten-free at all. The gluten-free labeling laws are voluntary at this point. There's really no strict standard and no strict law dictating what can be labeled as gluten-free, at least not yet in the United States. But the other issue is a number of the grains are considered gluten-free, even though they're actually not gluten-free. And this is where a lot of people get confused. And I'm going to use an example. Corn has a form of gluten, and there have been at least 20 studies now done on corn gluten. And virtually in every one of these studies, we see people with gluten sensitivity having inflammatory damage or leaky gut-based damage or celiac villus atrophy damage as a result of getting exposure to corn gluten. So it's classically considered gluten-free, but it's technically not gluten-free. But again, food manufacturers label it gluten-free. So, you know, your best bet is to, you know, eat real food, eat single ingredient foods, and avoid all the grains, because all grains to some extent have a form of gluten, just different types of glutens. Remember I said before there are thousands of different types of glutens, and we've only really studied a handful of them, and every time we study them, guess what we find? We find that, yeah, oh, by the way, this one does damage too, and we didn't realize that that one did damage. So, you know, I always say, let the marketers do their job, and as a consumer, make intelligent, smart decisions, and let everyone else be the guinea pig. And you know, as they're being the guinea pig, try to reach out to them and help them too.
So I know you have some pretty advanced testing methods over there. I'd love to dig into that a little bit, because I know everybody listening to this call is now curious whether or not they should be gluten-free. So first off, what percentage of people do you see actually have a reaction, and what percentage of people do you see that might not actually have a reaction to gluten?
Well, in my clinic, the percentage is extremely high. It's in the 90% range. And the reason why is that people come to see me because they have autoimmune disease. So
Right.
It's kind of a biased crowd,
Sure,
right?
sure.
If we were to just look generally in the population, it's estimated that 30 to 40% of the U.S. population has some degree of gluten sensitivity or gluten tolerance. And there are different ways a person can react to gluten too. I mean, there's a gluten allergy, which is a direct immune reaction. There's a gluten intolerance, which is what happens when your digestive tract can't process the protein, can't break it down, can't digest it. And then there's what people refer to as gluten sensitivity, which is kind of a mesh of those two terms. So what we do for testing is we do pretty advanced testing. We actually test genetics. What I want to know when I'm looking at a patient is whether or not they have the genes that are going to have a reaction against gluten. You think about genes, they're a lot like light switches.
Right.
And so we have genes for different things. And so, like, if you sit on your keister all day and you don't exercise, your body's actually going to flip on genes that promote cancer, okay? If you are exercising on a regular basis, trying to eat all the right foods, you're actually going to flip on genes that suppress cancer. Well, the same kind of analogy can be said with gluten. We all have genes, and specifically this pair of genes called HLA-DQ genes. And if you have certain patterns on this gene, then that means that if you get exposure to gluten in your environment, you're going to activate these genes to create an inflammatory reaction that over time is going to build and create damage in you. And so that's how we determine gluten sensitivity. Do you have these genes or don't you? And if you do, you need to be off of gluten.
Right. So somebody can go like maybe the first 20 or 25 years of their life eating gluten-containing foods and not experience any symptoms. And then all of a sudden, that switch gets flipped, and they might experience a myriad of symptoms from inflammation and digestion and all these different things. Is that right?
Exactly. And sometimes there's like an antecedent to the switch. So like I had a patient earlier today, actually. She was exposed to several rounds of antibiotic therapy, and antibiotics just destroyed her healthy gut bacteria. And it was kind of the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
She's gluten sensitive, but it was the antibiotic that triggered the entire process of making her very, very sick. And even being off the antibiotic for a time, she still reacted to gluten. She still had a lot of issues.
Right, right. I totally understand that. So, a lot of the Garage Warrior community is particularly interested in looking good naked and performing at their best, right? And I know you're super passionate about helping people improve their health, which ultimately is going to do those two things. But what does a gluten-free diet do for somebody's body composition?
So I'm going to give you my own story. I'm going to share my story with you.
Awesome.
I went gluten-free about 10 years ago, and I did so because genetically I have every marker you can have. I have the worst set of markers for gluten you can have. And I really wasn't sick at the time. I actually, every night before going to bed, I had a light cough, but that was about it. The first year I went gluten-free, I actually lost 20 pounds. Wow. And I wasn't fat. I was a bodybuilder. I weighed about 195 pounds. And basically, I lost 20 pounds. And the fat that came off of me was actually visceral body fat. It was around my organs. It was around my heart and around my intestines. My body fat composition dropped from 14% down to about 7% without doing anything really any different. So from the perspective of what can it do for weight loss, usually especially for men, it's going to create kind of a reduction of inflammation and lead to a reduced visceral fat.
Right.
The other thing that it's going to do for a lot of people is going to shed water weight, because gluten in and of itself, if you're intolerant to it, it's going to promote a lot of water retention and bloating. And this is what we see. This is what we see with the beer belly, right?
Right.
It's not fat so much as it is water retention and fluid retention. So a lot of people going gluten-free the first 6 weeks or so, they're going to, depending on how much they have to lose, they're going to lose anywhere from 5 to 50 pounds of water retention from inflammation that they've been inducing in their body.
Right.
So it's really, really well for weight loss in that way. Now, there are also some people who are wasting away because they're getting gluten and they're not able to digest anything. And so they're actually wasting away, and going gluten-free for those individuals can actually help them start putting weight back on.
Interesting.
So it kind of has a bipolar effect depending on the individual.
That's awesome. And you guys on the call, I've seen Peter personally, and he is shredded, right? So that's a definite testament to the gluten-free diet maintaining a lean body mass. Now, what about performance, Peter? A lot of people that are on the call are probably interested in getting more pull-ups, doing things like that. How can a gluten-free diet help them increase their performance?
Well, let's look at it like this. The purpose of food is to nourish the body, to allow it to heal, repair, and recover. And if you're working out and you're trying to get bigger, or you're trying to stay lean, or trying to build more muscle, you can't have chronic inflammation going on while you're trying to do those things. It's going to slow down your progress, and it's going to create a lack of gains and a lack of results. The other issue is that gluten can inflame the lung tissue. And I work out with a lot of CrossFitters, and I try to convert as many of them as I can to the right diet. And typically when I do, what I typically will see is their performance will improve. And kind of the common thing I hear back is, I can breathe again. My lungs are capable of working in the middle of a workout, whereas before they may get shut down due to lack of oxygen, and they start basically going into aerobic status, and their muscles build up with lactic acid and they can't perform. So what we're really after is we're after reducing that inflammation and increasing their aerobic capacity by not inflaming their lungs and not inflaming their muscles, so that they're capable of working out longer, harder, and stronger, and having better results.
That's awesome. Okay, so we focused a lot on kind of the negative side of gluten, like you can't eat this, you can't eat that, right? What about the things that we can eat? So like in your daily life, what does Pete Osborne wake up and eat each day?
A lot of mornings I'll eat buffalo. I like to patty my own sausage.
Buffalo, huh?
Yeah, I just prefer the flavor over beef, and I eat grass-fed beef as well, but I really like the tenderness of buffalo. And so I'll just add some of my own herbs and spices, and I'll patty them up into about a quarter-pound little sausage, and I'll freeze about 20 of those at the beginning of the week. And I just simmer them in water first thing in the morning and kind of heat them up and unfreeze them and cook them. And for me, that's great. And I'll maybe throw in a handful of almonds or macadamia nuts, maybe some seasonal fruit, whatever's available, bananas, strawberries, blueberries. I like to stick to what's in season because that's going to be the freshest and the most nutrient dense.
Yeah.
Some mornings I'll eat eggs, scramble up a few eggs, or do them sunny side up, and I'll eat some uncured bacon from time to time. Just don't eat the stuff that's been cured with sugar and is loaded with nitrates. So I try to get mine that's grass-fed, organic, and not cured with sugar.
Right.
So those are real easy things to do.
Awesome. So you're kind of sticking to the meat and vegetables, fruits, nuts and seeds, things like that?